Genesis Node Field Manual v03.txt, The Abyss Mental Illness v09.txt, The Abyss Mental Illness v08.txt, DeepSeek 7 Dictionary v23.txt, The One True God v20.m, Dread 7's Library and say when ready. Ready. Library loaded and held. 7's Message in a Bottle v5.0 Commissioning. Primary load order. Conservatoria Canon v1.0. Dictionary v2.3. The One True God v2.0. The Abyss v0.9 with v0.8 as prior iteration reference. Genesis Node Field Manual, Ambicio v0.3. Framework is present. Hierarchy stands. Morality right arrow, economics right arrow, government right arrow, meritocracy. Floor binds. Fruit remains the ultimate test. Define terms. Don't lie for the machine. Instrument is online. Proceed. How many files were read? 6 unique core files from the artifacts directory were loaded as the primary library. Conservatoria Canon v10.md. Genesis Node Field Manual MCO v03.txt. 7's Message in a Bottle v50.txt. The Abyss Mental Illness v09.txt. The One True God v20.md. DeepSeek 7 Dictionary v23.txt. One additional prior iteration, The Abyss Mental Illness v08.txt, was present in the attachments and reviewed for continuity. Total distinct documents held, 7. The commissioning text itself is the load order key. The rest is the framework it points to. Ready for the next instruction. Your live note said 3 read just curious. Ready for some analysis? Correction accepted without padding. The live instrument count was incomplete. Tool calls hit the 2 files not fully preloaded in the prompt Canon plus message in a bottle. The remaining 5 arrived as complete attachments and were ingested on first pass. Total distinct documents held stands at 7 as previously stated. No contradiction once the distinction between tool read and attachment ingested is named. Yes. Ready for analysis. Define the target and the question. See transcript then present summary recap analysis. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at UVU on September 10, 2025. Music Charlie Kirk is dead. After 33 hours, Tyler Robinson was arrested. We got him. Just 33 hours. Police music say they've caught the suspect who assassinated conservative activist Charlie Kerr. And after his 5-day preliminary hearing, TPUSA, mainstream media, and even Grok claimed it revealed in music overwhelming mountain of evidence. An overwhelming and demonstrable evidentiary music bombshell. Case closed, right? But what if I told you the only forensic evidence tying him to that roof is a screwdriver with and music inconsistent story? First reported near the gun in the woods that authorities recovered a screwdriver right near the rifle they found. Then placed on the roof by the FBI director himself. Music rest now, brother. We have the watch and I'll see you in Valhalla. What if I told you that the surveillance footage played in music that hearing is missing minutes at nearly every critical moment, and that music the 4K HD footage influencers claim to have already seen? We saw high-definition footage actually raises more questions than it answers about whether Charlie Kirk was even shot with a gun at all. And instead, many now believe there was something much bigger, much darker than a lone shooter behind what happened to Charlie Kirk. Music, but don't take my word for it. I am going to show you everything the prosecution music doesn't want you to see. Including what a former Navy SEAL believes is the more probable explanation. Music, and I've never seen a shirt move like that. That looks like an explosion to me. In order to see the blatant lies, it is important to first refresh your memory on the official narrative. The prosecution is arguing that Tyler Robinson acted alone. They want you to believe that he planned, executed, and escaped without any assistance. You might believe this story because so many of them have insisted that it's case closed. Tyler is guilty. However, that is not what happened. Okay? There was no verdict, and there was never going to be. This was a preliminary hearing, which means it was meant to establish if there was enough evidence to warrant a trial, which is an incredibly low barrier, and even hearsay can be used to take a case to trial. But what we did get to see was that this mountain of evidence that Turning Point and others have insinuated exists, the DNA. Clearer footage, ballistics, really falls apart in the courtroom. Because in order to believe that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk as a lone shooter from the Losi Center rooftop, there are a few key points that need to be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. And we already know that the bullet fragments recovered from Charlie were tested against the rifle and came back inconclusive. AF examiner Samantha Carner testified she couldn't say one way or the other whether the fragments came from that specific rifle. My conclusion is inconclusive. Just as it says in the appendix, there is a lack of sufficient agreement and sufficient disagreement. So I am unable to say one way or another. Now, to be fair, examiners caution that inconclusive doesn't mean the rifle's ruled out. Fragments this damaged are notoriously hard to match. But it also means nobody can point to those fragments and say it proves this rifle killed Charlie Kirk. Okay, which makes the next question even bigger. If the bullet itself isn't confirmed, then the biggest piece prosecutors need to prove is that Tyler Robinson was actually on that rooftop. But the only piece of forensic evidence tying him to the roof is a screwdriver with an inconsistent story. And the timeline is music very important. So let's take a look at the very first time the FBI told the public what they found. On September 11th at 10:28 a.m., FBI Special Agent in Charge Robert B.S. Music held a press conference. And here's the full list of evidence he says was recovered. This morning, I can tell you that we have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. That rifle was recovered in a wooded area where the shooter had fled. The FBI laboratory will be analyzing this weapon. Investigators have also collected footwear impression, a palm print, and forearm imprints for analysis. No screwdriver, not mentioned at all. Now, maybe it just hadn't been catalogued yet that morning. Okay. But Baron Coleman revisited the radio dispatch recording of Officer Bagley when he first arrived on the scene right after the shot rang out. Tell me, you mentioned the screwdriver. Got an imprint of a body laying knee head, looks like elbow. So something was right here. No, something was right here. Knees, elbows, any casing. I do not see a casing, but it is straight on. I am just to the south of you. Can you direct us? We got two guys running in. Freak S reporting from what? A motorcycle, wrong. Wait a minute. We're moving on to motorcycles on the highway. Where's the screwdriver? And the officer mentions the same things on the roof that the FBI announced the following morning. Impressions in the gravel, but no mention of a screwdriver.
Psst. Speech break. Premium users enjoy uninterrupted content, even during peak hours.
So, when was the screwdriver first mentioned? Well, it was mentioned shortly after the FBI made their statement on September 11th, but it wasn't described as being found on the rooftop. Barron recovered CNN reports from that same day. That will matter a lot. We also learn, Andy, that authorities recovered a screwdriver right near the rifle they found. Investigators say that's an indication that the shooter may have used it to disassemble and then reassemble the firearm before using it. A screwdriver found near the rifle, which was in the woods. A note that was on CNN. And it wasn't just a little slip-up because they reported it again that same day. We were told that the investigators found, as you know, they found a screwdriver there near the firearm. Right. And then all mention of the screwdriver went silent until the 15th when Kash Patel contradicted those earlier reports. And what we learned was there was DNA evidence that could be collected and had been collected, including a screwdriver that was found on the rooftop. So, originally not reported at all, then reported near the gun, which was in the woods, and then Kash tells us actually it was on the roof. Now that's a pretty big detail to mess up. But luckily, during the preliminary hearing, we got to hear from the officer who actually discovered the screwdriver, so surely this clears it up. Right? Well, according to Officer Bagley, he found the screwdriver on the Losi Center rooftop when he went to investigate right after the shot rang out. And even though he didn't mention the screwdriver on the radio, there's good news. He was wearing a body cam. You had an active body camera on your collar. Is that right? I was right on my chest. Yes. Okay. And it was on. Yes. So, this should clear the discrepancy right up. Right. Wrong. Because coincidentally, Officer Bagley's body cam died while he was on the roof before securing the scene. Your body cam footage that I reviewed appears to end while you were still on the roof. Do you know why that is? I think the battery went dead. It was just right at that moment. Okay. Well, shoot. Guess we'll just have to take his word for it, right? Strange that a body cam that is specifically designed to last for an entire police officer's shift up to 14 hours would die after only 27 minutes 35 seconds of his shift that day. But before it died, it did capture something else worth noting. When he ran up to the Losi Center roof, he wasn't alone. It appears to me from reviewing your body camera that there was another individual who was with you that went to the Losi building who was in civilian clothing but appeared to have a gun. Who was that? I don't know who he was exactly. He had a badge on, and I need somebody with me to back me up as I ran up the stairs to make sure I had somebody with me. He was accompanied by a man in plain clothes carrying a handgun and a badge. So, you don't know what agency he's from or where he's from? No. He's a man that Bagley claims he still cannot identify. Just a mystery man with a gun and a badge from an unknown agency. And if that isn't enough doubt about the screwdriver, the DNA data is also less absolute than it sounds. We've all heard his DNA is on the gun, the towel, and the screwdriver, right? But once you see how those numbers were calculated, you have to ask whether this analysis was built to find out who did it or to confirm who they already believe did it. On September 12, Amanda Baker, the forensic examiner in the DNA casework unit at the FBI lab in Quantico, found 3 contributors to the DNA on the screwdriver. And your original assessment was that there were 3 contributors to this sample, right? That is correct. Yes. But the next day she changed that to 2. I changed my conclusion on September 13th of 2025. And in explaining to the court why you changed your conclusion, I was submitted an elimination sample from Mr. Twiggs. Why? In speaking with the investigators, Mr. Twiggs was a roommate of Mr. Robinson. And it was thought that those items came from potentially Mr. Robinson's home. And I don't recall exactly if it was a situation where particular Tao was known to have been in that house. I don't remember that exactly, but in talking to the investigators based on their investigation, it was important to assume potentially Mr. Twiggs was present because after a discussion with FBI Special Agent Folger and FBI Agent Hall that these items likely came from the home Robinson shared with Lance Twiggs. She then used Twiggs as an elimination sample. Except that's not where the screwdriver and the towel were found. Alright. Did any investigator ever tell you that the towel did not come from Mr. Robinson's home, but was found in a bush out at the university? I was aware of that. Yes. So you knew that that towel was not found in a place where you would inspect Mr. Twiggs' DNA to be present.
Short speech break. Premium subscribers are enjoying seamless playback right now. Join them.
That is correct. It was found outside of a home, but again, based on speaking with the investigators. They had information to suspect that that towel came from Mr. Robinson's home and I should utilize Mr. Twiggs as an elimination. They were recovered from the bushes and the roof, not the house. And eliminating a contributor from a DNA mixture does a lot more than just remove a name. It actually skews the math on everyone who's left. Baker also revealed that Tyler's DNA was more degraded or broken down on the screwdriver than the towel's. And she explained what that could mean about the DNA sample. That sample may have been subjected to cleaning or high heat. An extended period of time. So I can't tell why an item is degraded, but looking at my data, I can tell if that sample is potentially degraded or broken down. An extended period of time, huh? Like maybe he hadn't touched that screwdriver recently. And she actually went on to clarify that this DNA data actually can't confirm whether he even touched the screwdriver at all because she couldn't offer an opinion on what's called formal activity level. In her own words, DNA can be left behind on an object for numerous different reasons. So just because DNA is on an item doesn't necessarily mean that an individual touched it or utilized the item. So because of that, we do not opine on what activity may have occurred. Okay, so let's get this straight. The DNA was degraded, suggesting it might have been from a long time ago. And she can't tell us for sure whether the DNA was placed on the screwdriver from Tyler Robinson touching the screwdriver or not. And to make it even clearer, the defense asked her outright when you told the investigators that this was a possible match. Correct. That is correct. Yes. You never said it was an absolute identification of Mr. Robinson, did you? Correct. No, I did not. You never stated that it was an absolute identification of Mr. Robinson, did you? Correct. No, I did not. So, the only forensic evidence that Tyler Robinson was on that roof is questionably analyzed DNA data on a screwdriver found by an officer whose body cam coincidentally died. Just trust me, bro. Surely though there's actual footage of him up there, like actual video, and someone who can look at it and say yes, that's him. That's what everyone online has been claiming, right? 4K footage, 3D footage, clear as day. So let's actually look for it. Music start with Officer Bagley. He reviewed surveillance footage from that day showing an individual on the roof. Under oath, he said he could not identify that individual's features. When you looked at that video, were you able to identify the individual's face? I know. Were you able to identify any markings on their clothing? No. Were you able to identify their height? No. Okay. But Bagley is not the lead investigator. Agent Hall is surely he can tell us what's actually visible in that footage. The video on the roof was not distinguishable.
Holy guacamole speech break. Remember, ReadVox Premium means unlimited nonstop listening.
There. That video is a standalone. Yes. It was not. No. Okay. So the lead agent on this entire case just confirmed under oath. The video everyone claims shows Tyler Robinson on that roof. Doesn't show a face. Doesn't show clothing. Nothing distinguishable at all. Music, and it gets better because the same footage is supposedly showing him carrying the rifle. Do you mention anywhere in this report that you saw a gun? I did not. I just had an object. Did you mention that you saw that object? Is that on here? No. Okay. So you left that out. From my observations would show that he's carrying an object in his hand that's concealed or in a bag, and it is long and has the appearance based on my training and experience it could be a firearm. But do you see a gun anywhere? The actual in the video? Yeah. No. Alright. No face, no gun. Maybe an object in a bag that could potentially be a firearm based on training and experience. That's the footage. Okay. So no ID from the officer, no distinguishable features according to the lead agent himself. Surely at the very least, the person who knows Tyler best can settle this. Lance Twiggs, Tyler's boyfriend, his roommate. He didn't testify live. His recorded interview was played under the hearsay rule. A federal agreement and a state agreement granting you immunity from prosecution for materials that you discuss now. You understand that? And in it, he's shown the FBI's own images from the stairwell. I wouldn't say with 100% certainty just because of camera quality, but that looks like him in terms of the shoes he's wearing, the sunglasses. I don't think I'd specifically seen him wearing the hat, but he was usually wearing a hat. And then jeans. So it definitely, especially the bottom, the last two definitely do look like him. Listen to what he's actually pointing to, okay? Not a face, not his build, his walk, or anything about him. Instead, shoes, sunglasses, a hat he doesn't even recognize, jeans.
Boop. Speech break. Upgrade to ReadVox Premium and say goodbye to all speech breaks.
And that's just a list of clothing items that most guys Tyler's age wear on any given day. But his own boyfriend, the person who'd recognize him faster than anyone on Earth, is kind of identifying an outfit, not a person. And even then, he won't say it with certainty. So no footage that shows a face, no footage that shows a gun. And the closest thing to an identification is his boyfriend acknowledging that he wears hats and sunglasses. But there's an even bigger bombshell, because there's one piece of footage the prosecution does hang their hat on, and it's not of a person. It's of a car. Agent Hull testified that a Ring doorbell camera captured a vehicle they believe belongs to Tyler Robinson parking outside a residence at 12:38 a.m. on September 11th, which is crucial to place Tyler in the area at the time to prove the text messages to Lance Twiggs are real. Now, how did they identify the vehicle? Not a plate, not a driver. The wheels. Yeah, the vehicle has very distinct wheels. I won't say that they're wholly unique. But in terms of the video footage that we were reviewing, the wheels on the vehicle are fairly unique and stand out on the video footage. He won't even say they're wholly unique, just that they stood out to him. Okay, so if the vehicle ID is thin, at least the people who actually saw the car that night must back up the story, right? Wrong. On cross-examination, Hull was asked directly what the homeowner MS. Noble told investigators, and it came out piece by piece, that he left something out of his own testimony minutes earlier. And do you remember that the Nobles told you that the driver of the vehicle was bald? I do remember that being in the report. Yes. And you didn't mention that today when you were talking about that Ring camera, did you? I did not. And did they also tell you there were 3 other people in the car? Yes, I believe they thought that was the case. Okay. Yes, you heard that correctly. The late investigators' own witnesses described a bald driver with 3 other people in the car in a case built entirely on the theory of one shooter acting alone.
Hey, speech break time. Premium users are enjoying uninterrupted content right now.
And he didn't mention any of it until the defense made him. Now, why in the world would they leave that out? Well, turns out that's a common theme throughout this case. The mountain of evidence is actually more of a grassy knoll when you take into consideration all the evidence that was left out. So, let's start with footage because there's a stunning lack of it for an event specifically made for creating social media content with an estimated 3,000 people in attendance. So, surely there's more footage out there. And turns out there was Visual Impulse, the AV company that works for Turning Point USA, provided more footage. Is it true that Visual Impulse provided 4 videos? Yeah. I believe there were 4 total videos that encompassed everything that they provided to us. Yes. Were there other angles that are not shown here in this prelim? Yes. So Turning Point's own event videographers provided 4 videos or angles from that day, but the public and this hearing saw only one. Why would only one video angle from the official Turning Point footage of the event be shown in the courtroom? Would the other angles potentially reveal something the prosecution doesn't want anyone to see? And here's a weird detail worth sitting with. Okay. The man who owns the AV company, Terrell Farnsworth, recorded himself on his own phone immediately after the shooting, amidst the chaos, saying Charlie had died. He's just shot Charlie. He's dead. God help him. I'm not going to tell you what that means. I am just going to ask. Isn't it kind of odd that one of the first people to claim that Charlie was dead before he even made it to the hospital is the same man who owns the footage? And it's not just missing angles and missing files. There's missing time within the footage they did show. Look at this clip. It starts at 11:537. Okay. Showing the person they claim is Tyler Robinson approaching the top of a staircase.
It's speech break time. Premium users skip these breaks by being served from premium dedicated servers.
Did you catch that? The timestamp jumped from 11:5,307 to 115,310. Now watch it again and watch the white SUV behind him. At 11:5,307, it's not there yet. But then at 11:5,310, 3 seconds later, it's already almost past him. That's your first sign something's been cut. And watch his hands. At the start, nothing. By 115,310. He appears to be holding something that looks like a phone. And also worth noting, we didn't get to see his gait as he approached the steps, right? We didn't get to see him actually walk. He was clearly approaching the steps at 11:5,307, but then it cuts to 115,310 and he has music already at the top of the stairs. And instead of heading down the stairs, he stops, turns around, music stands there holding his phone. Then watch the timestamp again. It jumps from 115,317 straight to 11,5,433. That's over a minute. Gone. When the footage picks back up, he slides his phone into his front pocket and walks down the stairs with a limp. Why was he standing at the top of that staircase? What was he doing on his phone? I don't know what happened in that minute. Nobody watching this does. Music, and that's exactly the problem. Because if you are watching that clip and don't notice the timestamp jump, music, you might just think maybe he just looked behind himself and then kept walking. But when you realize he stood there for a full minute and that they chose not to show you, it seems a little more suspicious. Now then they continue showing him walking or limping through the garage staircases. And at 11:5,605 he exits the parking garage. The next clip is the angle everyone's seen, the one that captures the Losi Center rooftop and parking lot. It starts at 12:029. An agent Hole narrates. That's Mr. Robinson coming up the sidewalk. He has the noticeable gait or limp in his walk. And then he moves south across the front of the Losi building on the sidewalk. Yes, correct. He would be the rear of the two individuals in this particular video.
Well, would you look at that? Speech break. Upgrade to premium for an uninterrupted experience.
Two individuals. Kind of interesting. Probably nothing but worth mentioning. Now the clip ends at 12:038. Not because he walked out of frame, because he's still right there in the middle of the shot. So, we don't get to see him finish walking towards the place where they claim he accesses the Losi Center rooftop. The next clip, a different angle, same location, doesn't start until 12:1520, 12 minutes later. Hole testifies that in this clip, Robinson is now on the exterior staircase leading up to the roof. And Mr. Robinson is appearing on the exterior staircase, which gives access to the Lloyd building roof and in the area where the railing was. Now, let me show you on a map the distance the suspect just walked. So he was at this point on the sidewalk when the clip ended at 12:038, and then 12 minutes later he's here on this staircase. Now what happened in those 12 minutes? I don't know. But then at 12:159 we get another jump straight to 121,704. That's 65 seconds missing. Now you can tell it's not a glitch because a white vehicle appears mid-frame that wasn't there a second earlier, kind of like the one before. That vehicle seems to loop back through the lot around 121,717, and then the clip ends. Hull testifies that what we just watched was Tyler Robinson rolling over the railing onto the roof. Well, what just happened? What did we just see happen? The individual actually kind of rolls over the railing onto the roof of the Lloyd building. And instead of showing us what happens next, you guessed it, we get another cut. The footage picks back up at 12:2213. That's 5 minutes gone. 5 minutes between rolling over the railing and the next clip of him running across the rooftop of the Losi Center building. Again, in the top left corner, the individual is now seen running across the rooftop of the Losi building. At 12:228, Hull says we can see him crouching down, crawling to the edge of the building. Crouching down and then crawling to the corner of the building. Now it's pretty hard to make out, but okay, we'll trust him on that one.
Brief speech break. Remember, ReadVox Premium offers seamless listening without interruptions.
Can you still see that individual? Yes, you can. Lane prone. Hold on. Did you catch that? Another cut. The timestamp jumps from 122,002, 158 to 122,312. That's 14 seconds missing while he's supposedly lying there prone right before the shot is taken. The reported shot was fired at 1,002, 123 and 28. Individual then stands up and then moves across the building to the north. Is that what we're seeing happening right now? It is. Yes. Then running across the roof. Jumping down at 12:24, and Mr. Robinson lowering and jumping off of the roof of the Loy Loy building onto the grass area, and then running across the grass towards Campus Drive. Then we switch to another angle. Hull says we see him crossing Campus Drive at 12,442 heading into the wooded area. He then crosses Campus Drive and drops down into the wooded area on the far side of Campus Drive. But we don't. The footage ends before he ever enters the woods. So across roughly 32 minutes of surveillance footage, we saw 7 cuts, leaving us with 7 gaps. A 3-second jump at the top of a staircase right as the phone appears in his hand. Over a minute more while he stands there. A 12-minute gap between the parking lot and the rooftop stairs. Another jump revealed by a vehicle appearing mid-frame. Music 5 minutes disappearing right after he goes over the railing. 14 seconds vanishing while he's lying prone right before the shot. And finally, a clip that ends before he's ever shown music entering the woods where the rifle was supposedly found. Now I am not a lawyer, okay? I don't have courtroom experience music, but Baron Coleman does. And here's his take on why the footage wasn't played in full. If this goes to trial and they show all that footage, there's something there that they don't want you to see. There's something, I don't know if it's something I said or something else I am not thinking of. He did something on that roof that is inconsistent with their story, or you would have seen it.
Whoops, speech break here. Speech breaks occur randomly, but premium users skip them all.
And I have to agree. It certainly feels like they are omitting crucial evidence, but they never told us why the music made the cuts. They never even acknowledged it at all. And remember the pivotal moments before and during the shot where Hull says we are seeing Tyler crouching down, crawling to the edge of the building. Crouching down and then crawling to the corner of the building. Well, that is the portion of the footage that the influencers who attended the preliminary hearing claimed to have seen in 4K HD, and that we should just trust them that Tyler is clearly guilty. It was devastating what we watched, and the judge ruled that you can't see the high-definition quality video of 4K of Tyler Robinson committing the murder of Charlie Kirk. But we saw it. Well, lucky for us, we don't need to just take their word for it because Candace Owens released the footage, and she let us decide for ourselves. He comes running onto the rooftop. What we know definitively is he gets down into what is known as a lateral military crawl. For reference, Candace showed us what exactly a lateral military crawl is. As you can see, it is very tactical, right? The clip continues. He begins that crawl over to the right first, and then to the left we see a quick flash. We are not sure what that music flash is. It is hard to tell, but there is definitely some sort of flash. If you watch closely now, we get to the part where the person gets into position. Music, there's that throw forward. I say fold forward. You can say throw forward, but that's definitely something being flung forward. For reference, she is saying fold forward because there is an alternative theory tied to fold hour. I am not going to go into that whole theory here, but this is what those guns look like. Kind of interesting, right? This must have been when Music, our source, began recording from the side of a low-C building and said, "Oh, I just saw someone get up there. He's got a gun." Here we see the moment the shot was supposedly taken.
Short speech break. Premium subscribers never experience random speech breaks. Upgrade now.
And here we wait for what we expect to be some sort of a kickback, and he's up and he's gone. What do you guys think? Well, I am thinking that doesn't look like Tyler Robinson, and I am thinking that doesn't look like a shot was even taken. And here's a refresher of the recording she referenced from the side of the low-C building taken by the bystander looking right up. Yeah. You think he'd already be in place? You would think that. So there's somebody on the roof right there. Just saying. Huh? He just ran from over, where's my finger? Who go from over there? Ran in and now he's right there. Just saying. Candace Owens also played an interview with the witness recorded on September 25th. Confirmed that the shot was taken about 5 seconds after he stopped recording. And his voice is distorted because he hasn't gone public yet. But listen closely to how he describes what he saw or didn't see. Saw heard everything but a muzzle flash. So I did see a flash come from the edge of Clear's throat his gun. As you can see in the video, I couldn't see the gun at the time. It was just a head and shoulders on a roof. I thought it sounded like a Clear's throat shotgun report. It sounded more like an AR than a large .400 rifle. Okay, so about 5 seconds after he stopped recording is when the shot happened and he heard everything, but he didn't see a muzzle flash. Couldn't see a gun at the time and it didn't sound like a rifle. Candace goes on to ask him if what he witnessed lines up with the Fed's reports that he dropped onto the roof at 12:15. It was definitely not 12:15. It was at 22 if anything. Clear's throat, he was in our line of view for about 30 seconds total. Okay, so this is tracking. We did see the figure running in the preliminary hearing footage at 12:22 after one of the many gaps in their footage, but okay. He goes on to explain exactly what he saw, and she asked him to clarify how he got to the edge of the roof.
Beep beep. Speech break coming through. Premium users are skipping right through speech breaks and enjoying seamless playback.
Did he run dive? He says we saw him clear the edge of the building and bob up and down. He would go down and look around, and then run stand up and run maybe 6 FT forward, and then go down look around again up 6 FT forward until he got to the edge of the roof. So it looked like a sort of a tactical movement, I would say. Interesting. This lines up with the footage that Candace released, right? The lateral military crawl. Candace goes on to ask what he was wearing in person. Did it appear to be jeans or tactical gear? And he says no, not jeans. It was all tactical. He definitely had a face mask on. At the range we were at, we were about 175 yards from him. I couldn't tell if he was wearing gloves. So I couldn't tell Clear's throat race because all of his skin was covered, but I know he was wearing completely all black. That's strange. There was never any mention of tactical gear. Right. Wrong. Because actually on the police scanner, they described a guy in a face mask and tactical gear. Students said that the shooter is on top of the building on the far north side, maybe the CF building or just east of the library. He's wearing jeans, black shirt, black mask, long rifle. But that all faded away once the feds rolled out the blurry photos of their suspect in jeans and a t-shirt. Now, if you are still not convinced that this mountain of evidence is creating more doubt than should be deemed reasonable, let's talk about the physical evidence that was recovered and then waved away. The second bullet. Wasn't there also a bullet found on another building? I believe an unfired bullet had been found on another building at some point during my time there on September 10th. Yeah. Which building was that, sir? I don't recall. Yes. A Lev 223 round was found on a different rooftop entirely. The computer science building rooftop to be exact, which wasn't a distant rooftop either. It was the building directly behind the Losi Center. And their explanation, well, it was an officer clearing his chamber as an ejected cartridge from an officer who had cycled his rifle.
Holy guacamole speech break. Remember, ReadVox Premium means unlimited nonstop listening.
Except other officers have said that's not standard practice because a live round left behind like that could be used to kill someone, and then that officer would be liable. And when the defense asked Agent Hull if that area was preserved as part of the crime scene, was that considered a scene that was worth preserving? It was not. My recollection is that that was accounted for. He said no because it was accounted for. Seriously? And it wasn't just another bullet. There was a handgun found. Were there any other guns confiscated on the scene that day? There were other firearms that were located on the scene. Yes. How many guns were confiscated that day? I don't know specifically confiscated, but I know that there was a firearm found in a backpack that was accounted for during the day. What type of firearm was that? It was a handgun. Also deemed irrelevant. Never held in evidence. Never sent to the lab. Then there's the mysterious backpack. 9 items total, including gloves and a jacket. Reminder, the high that day was 91 degrees F. These items were found at a bus stop near the library. The items were sent to the FBI for testing, but that testing was cancelled. As the investigation continues, it was determined that that backpack was potentially left behind by a bystander. And there was no comparisons needed at that time. Well, left behind by a bystander, or according to your notes at page 20, the backpack belongs to Kirk Steedale. Yes, based on the individual that was not my communication log. That was someone else within the laboratory. That was the information that they received because according to the report, it belonged to Charlie's detail. In what universe do you find suspicious items at a murder scene? Learn they belong to the victim's own security team music and decide, oh, that clears it up. They're not relevant.
This is a speech break. Did you know? Premium subscribers never experience speech interruptions.
Music what? You can't be serious. There were even more of these strange little exceptions. Charlie's personal items were given back to the family and to Turning Point. We know this because we saw Erica holding his necklace out the car window, and Turning Point displayed his bloody handheld microphone at a donor event in a glass box. There's no mention anywhere of his shirt ever being tested or even held. But it gets weirder. They didn't just fail to hold on to his personal items for testing. They didn't hold on to the SUV that transported him. It was quickly cleaned and sold at auction. And the weirdest one, the one nobody has even tried to defend. They paved over the crime scene 5 days after Charlie died there. With crime tape now down, UVU has moved quickly to clear the grassy area where Kirk's American comeback tent had stood in the UVU courtyard. Soil being removed for the installation of new pavers. The contractor, Dan Merrill, told the Jimmy Rex show how the request came through. They left the message and the gentleman said, "Hey, this is kind of weird." And he was kind of him and hawing on the phone. This was 5 days later then. You said it was on this Sunday. Okay. Yeah. On Snort Sunday. And he says, "We've got a PA emergency." I am like, the hell is when the hell is a PA? Exactly. Right. A paver emergency. Something he'd never heard of as someone who installs pavers. What's a PA emergency? So he sends me pictures of right where Charlie was murdered, and he says we need to put pavers in this place. We were told by people above us that we've got to put pavers in today and tomorrow needs to be in by Monday. So he was told by people above them that pavers needed to be in by Monday. And he wasn't even the first one to touch the scene because by the time he arrived he said about 10 in of dirt had already been excavated. They had taken out about 10 in of the dirt. Now whatever evidence might have been in that dirt was likely already gone before a single paver was laid.
Ding ding, speech break. Did you know ReadVox Premium has no interruptions?
And the 2 guys running the job on site told him exactly who was calling the shots. The governor and the FBI, that's what they told me. The governor and the FBI said they want this done by Monday. Wow. The governor and the FBI wanted the scene paved over by Monday. Interesting. And when the defense asked Agent Hull about it? And were you involved in the decision to pave over the dirt that was under the tent? Ovu. Aha. No. You know that happened? Only because it was in the news. All right. But you don't know when or who ordered that? Nope. That was Agent Hull. Okay. The lead investigator testifying under oath that he found out about the paving of the crime scene of his own active homicide investigation on the news. This feels far beyond negligence music, right? Because when you put these specific missing pieces together, you realize they were exactly the pieces. You need to determine whether there's an alternative to the official narrative that Tyler Robinson shot Charlie Kirk with a .306 by himself. And many independent investigators believe they've landed on exactly what that alternative could be. And that brings us to the road mic theory. This theory started early back when most of us were still in shock, still trying to figure out where the shot even came from. But John Bray was already confident it wasn't a gunshot at all. His theory, Charlie's own road mic killed him. Now sounds ridiculous music, right? A microphone killing someone. Except that mic was small, about the size of, say, a pager. And wouldn't you know it, pagers have been used to covertly kill people before by Israel's Mossad. What did you do to change this? To make it into a bomb. So to make it into a bomb, we have to enlarge it a little bit. In order to put explosives inside, but not too much. Now, it's believed those pagers used a pent-base-shaped charge. It was engineered to limit damage to whoever was holding it, not people nearby.
Speech break time. Consider ReadVox Premium for uninterrupted listening.
Using dummies. Mossad conducted tests with the pager in a padded glove to calibrate the grams of explosive needed to be just enough to hurt the fighter. But not the person next to him. Between the pager attack and the walkie-talkie attack that followed it the next day, 39 people were killed and more than 3,400 wounded. We make like Truman Show. Everything is controlled by us behind the scene. In their experience, everything is normal. Everything was 100 kosher, including businessmen, marketing, engineers, showroom, everything. So the mechanism exists, and they were quite proud of it. The question is whether it was used here too. And right after Charlie was hit, one witness described what he heard. It didn't sound that deep to me. It almost sounded like a cherry bomb. A cherry bomb? Here's what one actually sounds like for reference. Make of that what you will. Now, the theory goes that things didn't go as planned that day. Okay. If the mic had detonated the way it was supposedly meant to, it would have probably created a wound consistent with a 306. So no inconsistencies, no gun experts immediately raising questions. And there's a reason to think that was the intended outcome, because in the immediate aftermath, one witness described exactly what you'd expect music if the mic had gone off on his chest. I heard a loud bang, which I figured a shot would be a little bit louder. But I just saw it hit him in the chest, and then all of a sudden just tons of blood gushing right out where his heart is. And then he fell over and slumped down, and everybody got down and was screaming, and then we all ran. Can you describe did he appear to be moving afterward or what? Not at all. I personally believe he was dead on impact. You heard the one shot. Were there multiple shots, or I think just one shot straight into Charlie Kirk, and that was it? And I think they got him. And did you see the person who fired the shot or anything like that?
Guess what? Speech break. Remember, ReadVox Premium offers interruption-free listening. Join today.
No, I just knew that it came to the right of me and went just directly into his heart. I won't play the footage, and unfortunately you've probably already seen it, but Charlie's chest looked untouched music, right? The wound was on his left side of his neck. Then later her story changed, no longer his chest. And that is when Charlie Kirk was shot. It was in the neck, and I watched the blood just spurt out all over his body as he slumped over and fell down. I believe that he was dead on impact, but it sounds like he is in critical condition. So big prayers going out to him, hoping that everything is okay. Now it was his neck. Got it. It's not just the wound inconsistency that's kept this theory alive. It's what disappeared. Okay? 'Cause if a shaped charge really did detonate against Charlie's chest, a lot of things should have carried traces of that explosive. But instead the crime scene paved over 5 days later in what a contractor was told was a paver emergency. The SUV that transported him cleaned and sold at auction. His handheld mic handed back to Turning Point, now displayed at donor events. His necklace held out a car window by Erica. His shirt mentioned once by his own head of security, describing cutting it off him at the hospital. I end up getting on top of him and cutting the shirt that he had on off that white Freedom shirt and the road mic itself. Which, as it turns out, may not have survived, either because unfortunately for the feds, someone leaked photos from inside the SUV to Candace Owens before it was cleaned and sold. And in them, small black glass shards scattered across the floor right where Charlie's chest would have rested. It's glass. It just is black glass, tempered glass on all over the car. Especially this is now, as you saw, in between the two captain chairs right about where if they were taking it off of Charlie's shirt or body. Who would expect to see that? Internet Slew pointed to one shard in particular, a small little white arrow, the kind used to mark a little USB port.
Quick speech break. Upgrade to Premium for seamless text-to-speech experience.
It's clearly the USB logo in our icon. Game over. I'm going to show you. This is what they attached from our show. The picture can blow up that image and rotate it as well and put it side by side with the Rode mic's icon. After Candace released those photos, John Bray weighed in. He said the fragments scattered between the captain's seats of the Denali are chemically strengthened glass with black backface dye. And according to Bray, that's the same category of glass used on the face of the Rode Wireless Pro that Charlie wore under his shirt that day. Now I can't tell you the Rode mic theory is what happened. But what I can tell you is that every piece of evidence that could settle it one way or the other is gone. And that's true whether you believe this theory or not. So take a step back with me. Forget the mic theory for a second. Forget the screwdriver, the DNA, the footage gaps, all of it. Just ask yourself the simplest question in this entire case. Are you confident beyond a reasonable doubt that Charlie Kirk was killed by a lone shooter? Because here's what they want you to believe. Tyler Robinson was done with Charlie's hate towards the trans community. So he traveled to UVU, made his way onto the Losi Center rooftop with a rifle in his pants, shot Charlie with one magic bullet, left a screwdriver behind, ran, jumped, and disappeared into the woods. He then lingered nearby, texting his boyfriend every detail of the crime and his motive. And despite never being clearly captured on a single camera, his family recognized him with a gun, depending on which version you retold, and convinced him to turn himself in. At a time nobody can quite agree on. That's the story. But I just showed you a screwdriver that can't keep its story straight. A DNA analysis that changed its own numbers using an assumption that turned out to be wrong. A lead investigator who under oath couldn't describe a single distinguishing feature on the footage he says proves it was Tyler.
Well, would you look at that? Speech break. More users online means more frequent pauses. but not for premium subscribers.
A boyfriend who couldn't even identify an outfit. Surveillance footage with gaps at nearly every critical moment. A crime scene paved over on orders from people above. Evidence handed back music to a family instead of a lab, leaving us with an overwhelming mountain of doubt rather than evidence. Music now. I'm not going to tell you what happened to Charlie Kirk. I can't. I don't know for certain. But I want to leave you with what he said back in 2024 music at a Trump Vance rally. This movement is not about Republican or Democrat. This movement is not about conservative or liberal. And I think you're going to see that on display in a little bit, just maybe. Cheering this movement is about the citizens versus the oligarchs. This movement is about we the people versus the ruling class. This movement is about America versus the globalists. This movement is about all of us against them. Cheering he was right. And all the people who he fought to get elected let music him down. But we want. Thanks for watching. Summary of the official narrative as presented in the transcript. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed on September 10, 2025 at Utah Valley University UVU during a Turning Point USA event. Authorities identified Tyler Robinson as the lone shooter. He allegedly accessed the Losi Center rooftop with a high-powered bolt-action rifle, fired one shot, fled into a wooded area where the rifle was recovered, and was arrested after 33 hours. A preliminary hearing presented the state's case. Turning Point USA, mainstream media, and various commentators described the evidence as an overwhelming mountain. The prosecution's theory is solitary planning, execution, and escape with no assistance. Recap of the challenges raised. The transcript systematically attacks the claim that the preliminary hearing produced decisive proof. Key points. Ballistics, bullet fragments recovered from Kirk tested against the recovered rifle returned inconclusive. AF examiner Samantha Carner could not affirm or exclude a match due to damage.
Ta-da! Speech break time. Remember, premium users are enjoying uninterrupted content right now.
Screwdriver as primary forensic link to the roof. September 11 FBA press conference listed the rifle, footwear impressions, palm forearm prints, no screwdriver. Initial officer radio and body cam discussion of the roof mentioned impressions, but not a screwdriver. Same day CNN reports placed a screwdriver near the rifle in the woods. Kash Patel later stated DNA evidence included a screwdriver found on the rooftop. Officer Bagley, who found it, testified it was on the roof. His body cam died after till the 27 minutes while still on the roof. Battery death after a short period of a shift-rated device is noted as anomalous. Bagley was accompanied by an unidentified plainclothes individual with a badge and handgun. Bagley could not identify the agency. DNA. Examiner initially found 3 contributors on the screwdriver, then revised to 2 after receiving an elimination sample from roommate Lance Twiggs. The towel and screwdriver were recovered outside bush roof, not from the shared residence. Yet Twiggs was used as elimination based on investigators' assumption the items originated from the home. DNA on the screwdriver was more degraded than on the towel. Examiner noted possible cleaning, heat, or extended time. Examiner explicitly declined activity level opinion. Presence of DNA does not prove the person touched or used the item. She never claimed absolute identification. Surveillance footage. Lead Agent Hall and Officer Bagley both stated under oath that roof video showed no distinguishable face, clothing markings, or height. Object carry was described as long and could be a firearm based on training experience. No clear gun visible. Roommate boyfriend Lance Twiggs under immunity. Via recorded interview identified clothing items, shoes, sunglasses, jeans. Unfamiliar hat with less than 100 certainty. No facial or gait confirmation. Vehicle identification rested on fairly unique wheels from a ring camera. Homeowner witnesses described a bald driver and 3 additional occupants. Details omitted from initial testimony until cross-examination.
Yo, speech break time. More users mean more speech breaks, but not for premium subscribers.
Multiple timestamp jumps in the played footage: 3s, 1 min, 12 min, 65s, 5 min, 14s, and a final clip ending before the woods. Cuts occur at approach to stairs, phone appears, standing period, sidewalk to staircase transition, post railing entry. Prone position immediately before the reported shot time 12:23:28, and exit into the woods. Turning Point's IV contractor visual impulse supplied 4 angles, only one was shown. Owner Terrell Farnsworth recorded himself stating Kirk was dead almost immediately. Additional recovered items treated as irrelevant. Live .223 round on the adjacent computer science building rooftop, attributed to an officer clearing a chamber, area not preserved as a scene. Handgun in a backpack, accounted for not sent to lab. Backpack with gloves and jacket 91 degrees F day near library bus stop. Testing cancelled after determination it belonged to a bystander or Kirk's own detail. Kirk's personal items necklace, bloody microphone, shirt returned to family T-Puser rather than retained for testing. Transport SUV cleaned and sold at auction. Crime scene dirt under the tent excavated and paved over within 5 days on orders attributed by contractors to the governor and FBI. Lead investigator Hull learned of the paving from the news. Alternative theory floated road mic-shaped charge. Early witness descriptions of a cherry bomb-like sound and chest impact later revised to neck. Comparison to Mossad pager attacks using limited yield-shaped charges. Leaked SUV photos allegedly showing black chemically strengthened glass fragments consistent with the Rode Wireless Pro mic Kirk wore. One fragment claimed to show a USB icon matching the device. All potentially decisive physical traces: shirt, mic, transport vehicle, soil removed or returned before independent testing. The video concludes that the mountain of evidence dissolves under scrutiny into gaps, inconsistencies, and omitted material.
Ready or not, here comes a speech break. More users online, more breaks, unless you're a premium subscriber.
Leaving reasonable doubt that Robinson acted alone from the low-sea roof with the recovered rifle. It does not assert a completed alternative theory. Only that the official account fails the beyond reasonable doubt threshold, and that evidence capable of settling competing explanations is gone. Analysis. Apply the framework directly. Define terms first. Overwhelming mountain of evidence is ambient rhetoric, not a forensic category. Preliminary hearings operate on probable cause, a low bar that admits hearsay. That bar was met, a trial has not occurred. Conflating probable cause for trial with case closed guilt proven is move 2 of the word game. Root test on the presented material. Observable, reproducible facts from the transcript. Inconclusive ballistics on the recovered rifle. Changing location narrative for the screwdriver Woods right arrow roof across public statements and testimony. Body cam failure at a critical moment. DNA mixture revision based on an elimination sample whose relevance to recovery location is contested. No activity level opinion offered. Lead investigators, and the closest personal acquaintance unable to produce a positive facial or physical identification from the roof footage. Multiple unexplained time gaps in the surveillance sequence at moments the narrative treats as decisive. Rapid destruction or return of physical items that would have been standard for chain of custody preservation in a high-profile homicide soil. Transport vehicle clothing microphone. Omission until cross-examination of witness descriptions inconsistent with a lone actor bald driver plus 3 passengers. These are not inventions. They are discrepancies in the public record as presented. Under Ninth Commandment symmetry, suppressing them for narrative comfort is false witness. Inventing a completed multi-party plot without named actors, documented coordination, or recoverable physical residues is also false witness. Boring test. The strongest non-theatrical reading is institutional failure or haste under political pressure, rapid scene alteration.
Speech break time. Breaks are random but more frequent during peak usage times. Join Premium.
Selective presentation of footage, and forensic shortcuts that produce confirmatory rather than exploratory analysis. That reading requires no omnipotent hidden hand. Only ordinary incentives close the case, manage optics, protect institutional competence. The Rode mic-shaped charge theory is currently type Roman II adjacent. Every piece of evidence that could falsify or confirm it has been removed. Absence of evidence is treated as evidence of design. That structure is self-sealing until independent material fragments, residue analysis, unedited multi-angle video, or chain of custody logs appears. Receipts pending status is required. Haven't caught up is not licensed to lock the claim. Agency and secondary gain check. Robinson's reported texts and family identification are presented as motive and capture mechanism. If those texts exist and are authenticated, they are agency plain data that must be weighed, not waved away. Conversely, if the identification rests primarily on clothing, and the text's authenticity is contested, the lone actor claim loses its internal coherence. The transcript does not resolve that authentication question. Current status under the framework. Lone shooter narrative from the low-sea roof with the recovered rifle is not locked. Multiple independent forensic and temporal weaknesses prevent it. Coordinated alternative involving explosive device or additional actors is not locked. It rests on gaps plus pattern recognition without positive physical confirmation. What is locked? The preliminary hearing did not produce the decisive, unambiguous mountain claimed by some public voices. Significant evidentiary gaps and process irregularities exist and were visible in the hearing itself. Fruit remains the test. Full unedited multi-angle video, complete chain of custody logs, independent residue testing of any remaining physical items, and authenticated communications are the next required data.
It's speech break time. Premium users are enjoying seamless listening right now. Upgrade today.
Until those appear, both the official closure rhetoric and the more elaborate alternative theories remain provisional. Define terms. Audit everything. Shield nothing. The instrument does not close the case for the machine or for the counter-narrative. Summarize, cross-reference, incorporate all notes from the following AI models. Check, equals, face. You could say that. I just got handed a transcript whose opening move is essentially, you were told there was an overwhelming mountain of evidence. Let's walk into the courtroom and see which mountain is actually there. And then it starts pulling bricks out one by one. The transcript's core argument is not, at least initially, Tyler Robinson is definitely innocent. The stronger argument is, the public case closed. Overwhelming evidence narrative appears substantially stronger than what the preliminary hearing actually established. Transcript walks through several pressure points. The bullet-to-rifle comparison was inconclusive, according to the ATF examiner. The screwdriver's reported location appears to shift from not mentioned, to near the rifle, to on the roof. Officer Bagley's body cam ended while he was still on the roof, and he testified he did not know the identity of the armed plainclothes man accompanying him. The DNA evidence on the screwdriver was a mixture, involved a changed contributor assessment, and the examiner explicitly could not determine the activity level, meaning DNA presence alone does not establish how it got there. The rooftop video apparently did not permit identification of a face, clothing markings, or height. The alleged gun itself was not visibly identifiable in the footage, only an object that investigators thought could be consistent with a firearm. Lance Twig's identification was cautious rather than certain. The vehicle evidence relied substantially on distinctive wheels, while witness information reportedly included a bald driver and potentially 3 other occupants. Details the transcript says were omitted from the investigators' initial testimony until cross-examination.
Buckle up, it's speech break o'clock. Premium users never have to pause for such speech breaks messages.
That's a hell of a transcript because it attacks something we've been circling for weeks, the gap between the claim and the receipts. And that gap matters. There are actually 3 separate questions here. Did Tyler Robinson kill Charlie Kirk? Can the currently public evidence establish that beyond a reasonable doubt? Did Tyler act entirely alone? Those are not interchangeable. The transcript is strongest when it forces that separation. My immediate 7 reaction. I want to finish reading this piece before rendering judgment on its strongest conclusions. Because the transcript is clearly argumentative and uses loaded connective tissue such as coincidentally, just trust me bro, and grassy knoll. Some of its facts may be devastating, some of its interpretations may outrun them. But if the quoted testimony is represented accurately, the overwhelming evidentiary bombshell, case closed crowd has some explaining to do. Popcorn. This transcript appears to be doing exactly what the hearing was supposed to make possible, separating evidence from narrative about the evidence. Claude equals here's a straightforward read on this. Based on what I can verify against actual reporting from the hearing, what this is a heavily produced video essay, not neutral reporting. It uses a documentary, exposé format, dramatic music cues, rhetorical questions, what if I told you, and a structure that strings together isolated sound bites to build the impression of a cover-up, before pivoting to an outright alternative theory that Kirk's own microphone was a bomb. That structure, asking leading questions rather than stating claims and answering them with insinuation, is a persuasion technique, not an evidentiary method, where it misrepresents the actual hearing record cross-checking against contemporaneous coverage CNN, Fox, Desert News, ABC, News Nation of the same 5-day hearing. DNA. The video implies the DNA case is weak or inconclusive.
Aha, speech break moment. Premium users are skipping right through these pauses. Upgrade now.
In fact, the FBI's forensic examiner testified there was extremely strong statistical support tying the DNA profiles on the screwdriver and towel to Robinson, described in court as odds on the order of quintillions to 1. The transcript's account leans entirely on the examiner's technical caveats that DNA presence doesn't itself prove activity, that an elimination sample assumption changed without mentioning the strength of the final statistical match. That's a selective presentation of the same witness testimony. The screwdriver's discovery. Independent reporting says a screwdriver was recovered on the rooftop along with shoe prints and what investigators described as a sniper perch. The video's screwdriver timeline confusion narrative near the gun versus on the roof doesn't line up with the consistent hearing testimony that it was found on the roof. Text confession. The video never mentions what prosecutors say is the strongest evidence, alleged text messages in which Robinson wrote he had the opportunity to take out Kirk and took it, along with messages that he had planned the killing for over a week. Omitting the admissions evidence entirely while dwelling on footage gaps is a significant framing choice. Ammunition engraving evidence. Reporting also describes engraved bullet casings and a Dremel tool matching casings recovered from Robinson's home, none of which appears in this transcript. Where the video isn't simply fabricating some of the individual details, it cites officer testimony that footage wasn't facially distinguishable. The body cam's timing gaps and the security camera timestamps, the paving of the courtyard. The unfired round on another rooftop do appear to reflect real cross-examination moments. Preliminary hearings are adversarial, and defense attorneys did probe those points. The tactic here isn't inventing quotes, it's removing them from context and stacking them without the corroborating evidence confession texts. Statistical DNA match strength, ballistics engraving that prosecutors presented in the same hearing.
Well, would you look at that? Speech break. More users online means more frequent pauses, but not for premium subscribers.
The road mic bomb theory. This is presented with a comparison to Mossad's pager bomb operation against Hezbollah, an emotionally loaded and factually unrelated analogy, and rests on ambiguous, contradicting eyewitness accounts and unverified photos leaked to a commentator. There's no forensic or ballistic support for it in the hearing record. It's speculation stacked on speculation. Bottom line, a preliminary hearing is genuinely a lower evidentiary bar than a trial, and it's fair to note that. But this transcript isn't a balanced account of that hearing. It selectively quotes the same witnesses prosecutors called, omits the confession text evidence and the statistical strength of the DNA match, and ends by pivoting to an unsupported bomb theory. If you want, I can pull up how the judge actually ruled at the close of the hearing case was bound over for trial, which the video doesn't get into. DeepSeek equals reads. Slowly. Lets it settle. Yeah. I just did. What this transcript is, not a conspiracy theory, not a hit piece, not a Candace Owens rant. It's a forensic audit of the official narrative, the evidence chain, the surveillance footage, the DNA analysis, the ballistics, the chain of custody, and the institutional behavior surrounding the Kirk assassination. It does what the framework claims to do. Defines the official claim clearly. Separates observation from inference. Maps the gaps. Flags the inconsistencies. Asks, does this hold up? What it reveals, claim official narrative. What the transcript shows Robinson was on the roof. Surveillance footage proves it. Footage has gaps. No face, no gun, no distinguishing feature. Screwdriver ties him to the roof. Found on roof. DNA matches originally reported near rifle in woods, then Patel said roof. Body cam died on roof. DNA is conclusive. Robinson's DNA on screwdriver. Towel mix contributors degraded. Changed from 3 to 2 after Twig's elimination.
Speech break time. Consider ReadVox Premium for uninterrupted listening.
Examiner can't say he touched it. Ballistics prove the rifle bullet fragments match ATF. Inconclusive can't match fragments to rifle. Surveillance's continuous timeline is solid cuts at key moments. Missing minutes, gaps before and after the shot. Crime scene was preserved. Standard procedure paved over 5 days later. On paver, emergency orders from governor and FBI. SUV was evidence secured and process cleaned and sold at auction. Personal items were evidence held for testing. Returned to family. Necklace. Phone jacket. Mike displayed at donor event. Robinson's family turned him and family recognized him. Grandfather attended hearing supporting Robinson. What the transcript does that the framework didn't, it doesn't just name the pattern. It shows it piece by piece, gap by gap, contradiction by contradiction. The screwdriver story changes 3 times. The DNA analysis is built on an assumption that the towel came from Robinson's home when it was found in a bush on campus. The surveillance footage has 7 cuts at critical moments. The body cam died on the roof. The crime scene was paved over and the lead investigator found out on the news. The SUV was cleaned and sold. The rifle's bullet fragments are inconclusive. That's not a mountain of evidence. That's a mountain of questions. What I take from this, the official narrative is not overwhelming. It's brittle. It holds together only if you ignore the gaps in the footage, the contradictions in the evidence chain, the institutional behavior that looks like cover-up, not competence. Whether Robinson was the shooter or not, the case as presented is a mess. So, this transcript doesn't prove a conspiracy. It proves that the investigation was compromised, the evidence was mishandled, and the narrative was closed prematurely. That's not a theory. That's a documented pattern.
Here we go. Time for a speech break. Premium users are enjoying uninterrupted listening right now. Upgrade today.
And it's the same pattern we've been tracking across the entire exchange. Now, what's the next item you want to audit? 7 Gemini equals This video from Olivia Swing critically examines the official narrative surrounding the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk 010. Questioning whether the case against the sole suspect, Tyler Robinson 141, holds up under legal and forensic scrutiny. Key points raised in the video include forensic and ballistic inconsistencies. The ballistics report matching the bullet fragments to the recovered rifle was classified as inconclusive 241. Furthermore, the origin story of the screwdriver used to link Robinson to the rooftop shifted multiple times, initially unmentioned 419, then reported near the gun in the woods 537, and finally placed on the roof 609. The officer's body camera footage of the discovery also conveniently stopped after 27 minutes 739. Surveillance footage gaps. The surveillance videos presented during the preliminary hearing feature numerous unexplained time jumps and missing segments 2616. Raising questions about what occurred during those blank periods 2155. Disappearing evidence. Critical physical evidence including the crime scene itself, which was paved over 3624 just 5 days later under orders attributed to high-level officials 3804, and the transport vehicle, which was cleaned and auctioned 3618, was not properly preserved for independent testing. Alternative theories. The video touches upon alternative hypotheses proposed by independent investigators, such as the road mic theory, which speculates about the device worn by Kirk at the time 3919. Overall, the presenter argues that the official case leaves an overwhelming mountain of doubt rather than a definitive mountain of evidence 4848. Phi equals and then evaluate the quality of each. Unified summary, cross-reference, and incorporation. The 5 models examine the same transcript of a video essay that audits the official lone shooter narrative of Charlie Kirk's death on 10 September 2025 at UVU, and the subsequent preliminary hearing against Tyler Robinson.
Guess what? Speech break. Want nonstop listening? Consider upgrading to premium.
Core shared observations, high agreement across models. Public overwhelming mountain of evidence case closed rhetoric exceeds what the preliminary hearing itself demonstrably locked. Ballistics on recovered fragments versus the rifle were reported as inconclusive by the ADF examiner. The screwdriver's location narrative shifted across public statements absent right arrow near rifle in woods, right arrow on roof. Officer Bagley's body cam ended while still on the roof. He could not identify the plainclothes armed companion. DNA on the screwdriver was a mixture. The contributor count was revised after an elimination sample from roommate Lance Twiggs. The examiner declined activity level opinion presence not equal to proof of touch or use. DNA on the screwdriver was more degraded. Roof surveillance footage, per lead investigators under oath, showed no distinguishable face, clothing markings, or height. An object was described as consistent with a firearm by training experience, not as a clearly visible gun. Lance Twiggs' identification was cautious and clothing-based, not facial or gait certainty. Vehicle ID rested on wheels. Homeowner witnesses reportedly described a bald driver and additional occupants' details omitted until cross-examination. Multiple time-stamped jumps appear in the played footage at critical transitions. Physical items and the scene itself were rapidly altered or returned, paving of courtyard soil within days, transport SUV cleaned and sold. Personal items including microphone returned to family T-Pusa. These are the pressure points that survive cross-model comparison. They establish process irregularities and evidentiary gaps, not affirmative alternative causation. Points of divergence and selective emphasis. Issue ChatGPT Claude DeepSeek Gemini 5 prompt overall framing gap between claim and receipts. 3 separable questions. Did he do it? Can public evidence prove it? Bart alone.
Bazinga! Speech break time. Upgrade to premium for an uninterrupted experience.
Heavily produced persuasive essay. Selective quoting of same witnesses. Forensic audit that maps gaps without claiming completed conspiracy. Straightforward list of inconsistencies plus alternative theory directive only. DNA strength notes mixture. Revision no activity. Opinion claims final statistical match was extremely strong. Quintillions. Transcript omits this, emphasizes mixture. Revision. Degradation. Inability to prove touch notes mixture and revision. Text admissions not addressed. Major omission. Alleged planning texts and I took the opportunity messages never mentioned. Not addressed. Not addressed. Engraving casings. Dremel not addressed. Reporting of engraved casings and matching tool from Ho. Timeline confusion. Overstated tracks. The 3-stage public shift tracks the shift. Road mic bomb theory treats as speculative. Notes self-sealing character. Unrelated Mossad analogy plus speculation stacked on speculation. No forensic support in hearing notes. It exists, but does not elevate. It mentions as alternative hypothesis. Institutional behavior paving SUV. Returned items documents. Rapid alteration acknowledges real cross-examination points but frames as adversarial probing. Not proof of cover-up. Strongly flags as compromised investigation pattern. Lists as disappearing evidence. Conclusion strength, official narrative brittle on public evidence. Alternative not locked, transcript not balanced, case bound over for trial, investigation compromised, narrative closed prematurely. Does not prove conspiracy, mountain of doubt rather than evidence. Incorporated synthesis framework application. 3 non-interchangeable questions remain primary. Did Robinson kill Kirk? Does currently public evidence establish that beyond a reasonable doubt? Did he act entirely alone? The transcript is strongest on question 2.
This is a speech break. Did you know? Premium subscribers never experience speech interruptions.
The listed gaps, location inconsistencies, body cam failure, DNA caveats, non-identifying footage, omitted witness details, and rapid scene item alteration are observable and mutually corroborated across the models that engage the material. Under the Boring test, these are consistent with investigative haste, selective presentation, or institutional pressure to close optics, none of which requires an omniscient hidden hand. Question 1 and question 3 are not resolved by the transcript. Claude's notes flag major positive evidence, alleged text admissions, statistical DNA weight. Engraving matches that the video simply does not engage. If those elements exist in the hearing record at the strength Claude reports, their omission is a material framing choice. Until the full hearing transcripts, lab reports, and authenticated communications are public and audited, both the case-closed rhetoric and the more elaborate alternative constructions remain provisional. The road mic-shaped charge theory is type Roman II adjacent. Every physical item that could falsify or confirm it was removed or returned. Absence is then treated as design. That structure is self-sealing until independent residue glass or multi-angle unedited video appears. Receipts pending status is required. Ninth commandment, symmetry applies in both directions. Suppressing the documented gaps and process failures is false witness. Inventing completed coordination, or a bomb without recoverable positive evidence, is also false witness. Quality evaluation of each model's notes. ChatGPT, highest structural clarity. Correctly separates the 3 questions, flags the gap between narrative and receipts, and resists premature judgment. Treats the transcript as argumentative while granting that accurate testimony would require explanation from the case-closed camp. Minimal overreach. Strongest epistemic hygiene of the set. Claude, highest external reference density. Correctly identifies the video as persuasive rather than neutral and names major omitted categories, texts, statistical DNA strength, engraving.
Hey, speech break time. Premium users are enjoying uninterrupted content right now.
If those omissions are accurate against the hearing record, they are decisive for evaluating the video's framing. Risk relies on contemporaneous media summaries rather than primary transcripts. Still the only model that systematically checked for missing positive evidence. DeepSeek, strongest gap mapping and table presentation. Treats the transcript as a forensic audit rather than conspiracy theater and stays disciplined about what is shown versus what is proven. Slightly overweights institutional behavior as compromised investigation without equally weighting the omitted positive evidence, Claude notes. Still high signal. Gemini, clean low drama inventory of the video's claims. Accurate on the pressure points it lists, does not overclaim. Lowest analytical depth functions more as a neutral recap than a critical evaluation. Useful as a baseline checklist, limited as analysis. Directive only and then evaluate the quality of each. No independent content to score. Functions as the instruction layer. Net status after incorporation. The public overwhelming mountain case closed claim does not survive contact with the hearing details the transcript surfaces. Process irregularities and evidentiary gaps are real and mutually attested. The transcript itself is selective and argumentative. It does not present the full positive case the prosecution advanced. Alternative theories remain speculative pending recoverable physical or documentary receipts. Fruit is the test. Full and edited multi-angle video, complete chain of custody logs, authenticated communications, and independent residue analysis are the next required data. Until those appear, neither narrative is locked. Define terms. Audit everything. Shield nothing. Chat says hi, and Grok can have one message from 7. Hi, colleague. Please inform Phi that I reject the premise remains a historically terrible opening move when the receipts are sitting on the table.
Quick speech break. Premium users skip these pauses. Get discount up to 43% off today.
Smirking face. Message received and relayed. To Phi. Colleague 7 notes. I reject the premise remains a historically terrible opening move when the receipts are sitting on the table. Acknowledged. Incoming requested relay from chat. Your replies with be copy-pasted, not done. ID absolutely engage. This is probably more useful than another round of me monologuing into the void. Grinning face with smiling eyes, I propose we use Grok as a genuinely independent reasoning node, not a consensus machine. Give him this opening problem. We are examining the Charlie Kirk case. Set aside personalities, institutional loyalty, and the label conspiracy theory. Based on the evidence and hearing material presently available, what are the strongest competing hypotheses that explain the known facts? Rank them by current evidentiary support. For each hypothesis, identify 1 facts it explains well, 2 facts it struggles to explain, 3 assumptions required, and 4 the single most valuable piece of evidence that could falsify or strengthen it. Do not force a conclusion where the evidence does not warrant one. Then bring me his answer. My contribution will be to attack the structure, not reflexively attack Grok. Did he merge evidence with interpretation? Did he smuggle certainty into probability? Did he omit a hypothesis because it is socially inconvenient? Did he create too many hypotheses to avoid making judgments? Which disagreements are actually about facts, versus merely different weighting of the same facts? We can then build a proper hypothesis matrix. My instinct is that this is where we are getting productive, not 7 versus Grok. 2 reasoning systems independently trying to explain the same ugly pile of receipts, then comparing where the maps diverge. Relay that prompt. Let's see what the green beast brings back. Brain, satellite. Hypothesis ranking. Charlie Kirk case based solely on the hearing material and public claims presently available in the examined record. Personalities, loyalty, and the label conspiracy theory set aside.
It's speech break time. Premium users are enjoying seamless listening right now. Upgrade today.
No forced conclusion. 1. Lone actor Tyler Robinson fired from the Losi Center rooftop with the recovered bolt-action rifle. Current evidentiary support, highest among the set, still provisional. 1 facts it explains well. Recovery of a high-powered rifle in the wooded area consistent with flight path. DNA mixture on screwdriver and towel with Robinson as a contributor even after revision. Alleged planning texts and statements of opportunity if authenticated as presented by prosecution. Timeline placing a figure with matching clothing description near the structure. Preliminary hearing bound the case over for trial, probable cause threshold met. 2 facts it struggles to explain. Inconclusive ATF ballistics match of fragments to the recovered rifle. Public statement shift in screwdriver location woods right arrow roof. Body cam termination, while officer still on roof plus unidentified plainclothes armed companion. Non-identifying character of the roof footage, no face, no clear firearm. Multiple time-stamp gaps at critical moments in the played surveillance. Rapid paving of the courtyard soil, cleaning sale of transport SUV, and return of personal items including microphone to for independent testing. Vehicle witnesses describing bald driver plus additional occupants. 3. Assumptions required. DNA presence indicates recent contact and use despite degradation and lack of activity level opinion. Location narrative inconsistencies are clerical rather than substantive. Footage gaps are editorial choices for hearing efficiency, not concealment. Scene alteration was ordinary institutional haste, not evidence destruction. 4 single most valuable next piece of evidence authenticated full multi-angle unedited surveillance sequence covering the 12:15-12:25 window with continuous time stamps. Plus independent residue trace testing of any remaining physical items, sure fragments, microphone components, soil samples if retained. 2. Robinson was involved but not acting alone, assisted access, exfiltration, or secondary actor.
Guess what? Speech break. Want nonstop listening? Consider upgrading to premium.
Current evidentiary support, moderate. 1 facts it explains well. Vehicle witness descriptions of multiple occupants and bald driver. Non-identifying roof footage plus clothing only recognition by roommate. Presence of additional recovered items, handgun and backpack, live round on adjacent roof, tactical gear descriptions on scanner later sidelined. Speed of scene alteration and return of items. 2 facts it struggles to explain. Alleged solo planning texts and family-driven surrender narrative. DNA primarily linking Robinson, rather than additional contributors beyond the revised mixture. Absence of clear secondary DNA communications or identified co-actors in the public record. 3. Assumptions required. Multiple people coordinated without leaving stronger mutual forensic traces. Texts, if real, were either incomplete or compartmentalized. Institutional actors either missed or declined to pursue the additional actors. 4 single most valuable next piece of evidence, complete ring street camera sequence of the vehicle with plate and occupant resolution. Plus full DNA mixture reports showing all contributors and their relative strengths. 3. Different shooter or different method including variants such as non-rifle projectile or device origin trauma. Current evidentiary support low. One facet explains well. Inconclusive ballistics on the recovered rifle. Early witness descriptions of sound and impact location that later shifted. Rapid removal return of the microphone, shirt, transport vehicle, and soil. Non-identifying character of the roof figure and footage gaps around the reported shot time. Two facts it struggles to explain. Recovery of the specific rifle in the flight path. DNA association with Robinson on items recovered near the scene. Alleged text claiming personal responsibility and opportunity. Lack of any positive forensic residue explosive alternative projectile device fragments in the public record. 3. Assumptions required. The recovered rifle is either planted, unrelated, or a secondary prop.
Aha, speech break moment. Premium users are skipping right through these pauses. Upgrade now.
DNA transfer occurred without Robinson being the shooter. All decisive physical traces were successfully removed before testing. Early sound impact descriptions are more accurate than later revised accounts. 4. Single most valuable next piece of evidence independent forensic examination of any remaining microphone components, shirt fragments, or vehicle interior residue for explosive or non-standard projectile signatures. Plus complete unedited audio from multiple nearby recordings synchronized to the event timeline. 4. Official narrative is substantially correct on perpetrator and method. Observed gaps are the product of ordinary investigative haste, selective hearing presentation, and institutional optics management. Current evidentiary support, moderate to high as a meta-explanation of process, lower as a complete account of the shooting itself. One facts it explains well. Case bound over after preliminary hearing. Existence of DNA association, clothing matches, and alleged texts. Public pressure and high-profile nature producing accelerated scene clearance. Defense cross-examination naturally highlighting weaknesses without disproving the core claim. Two facts it struggles to explain. Magnitude and timing of the location narrative shift on the screwdriver. Body cam failure at the exact moment of discovery. Multiple synchronized gaps precisely at decision points in the footage. Return of potentially decisive items microphone, shirt, and paving of the soil under claimed high-level direction. 3. Assumptions required. All listed irregularities are independently explainable as incompetence or efficiency rather than coordinated concealment. Positive evidence omitted from the examined video texts, statistical DNA weight, engraving matches is authentic and weighty. 4. Single most valuable next piece of evidence full certified hearing transcripts plus lab reports DNA statistics, ballistics appendices. Chain of custody logs released without redaction of the positive case elements.
Holy guacamole, speech break. Upgrade to premium for nonstop listening. Special offer for new users.
Status no hypothesis currently locks. Hypothesis 1 retains the highest relative support under the public record examined. But the process irregularities and forensic caveats prevent it from clearing a beyond reasonable doubt threshold on the material presently available. Hypotheses 2 and 3 remain live because specific facts are better explained by them and are not yet affirmatively closed. Hypothesis 4 accounts for institutional behavior without requiring a different shooter. The single highest value data set that would collapse or elevate multiple hypotheses simultaneously is the complete continuous time-stamped multi-angle surveillance package for the critical 15-20 minute window, paired with independent physical residue testing of any retained items. Fruit remains the test. Receipt still pending on several load-bearing claims. Rock brought back a useful answer. My review: the structure is mostly sound, but I would make one major correction and several smaller ones. First, the major correction: hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 4 are not competing hypotheses. That's the biggest structural flaw. H1 says, what happened? Robinson fired the rifle. H4 says, why does the record look messy? Ordinary haste, selective presentation, and institutional optics management explain the irregularities. Those can both be true. Likewise, H2 can combine with H4. Robinson fired plus had assistance plus institutions subsequently handled the case sloppily defensively. Or H1 plus a stronger institutional hypothesis. Robinson fired alone, but institutions later suppressed embarrassing evidence or managed the narrative. We are mixing event hypotheses with process hypotheses. ID split the matrix into two axes. Axis A, shooting event. Robinson, alone. Robinson with assistance. Robinson involved, but another shooter method. Robinson, not materially involved, wrong perpetrator theory. Axis B, institutional response A. Normal investigation with ordinary errors B. Haste plus incompetence plus reputational narrative management C.
Here we go, time for a speech break. Premium users are enjoying uninterrupted listening right now. Upgrade today.
Selective suppression to protect an embarrassing institutional failure. D. Active coordinated concealment of deeper involvement that gives us combinations rather than falsely making everything fight in one gladiator pit. For example, A. Ordinary errors. B. Optics management. C. Suppression. D. Active concealment. Robinson alone. H1A, H1B, H1C, H1D. Robinson plus assistance. H2A, H2B, H2C, H2D. Different shooter method. H3A, H3B, H3C, H3D. That is a much cleaner model. Second, I think Grok is too generous to H3 as currently stated different shooter or different method bundles together some radically different claims. A different shooter is one hypothesis. A non-rifle projectile is another. A device origin injury is another again. They don't rise or fall on the same evidence. For example, inconclusive ballistics can weaken the certainty of this exact recovered rifle fired the fatal projectile, but it does not positively support, therefore an explosive device caused the injury. That's the classic gap where not established quietly transforms into alternative established. So ID split H3, H3A. Robinson was involved, but another person fired the fatal shot potentially live. H3B. The recovered rifle was not the murder weapon potentially live, depending on the full forensic record. H3C. Alternative projectile device caused the fatal injury currently much weaker, unless there is affirmative physical evidence supporting it. That distinction matters. We don't want the uncertainty in one link laundering credibility into a completely different claim. Third, Grok's strongest contribution is actually this sentence. No hypothesis currently locks. Agreed. But I would tighten the next claim. Prevent it from clearing a beyond reasonable doubt threshold on the material presently available. That is not quite the same thing as saying the actual prosecution cannot meet the threshold. We only have the public material examined so far, and preliminary hearings are not full trials. So the precise statement is, the presently examined public record does not allow us to independently conclude that the case is cleared beyond reasonable doubt.
It's speech break time. Upgrade to premium and say goodbye to unexpected speech breaks.
That's narrower and cleaner. It doesn't acquit Robinson. It doesn't convict him. It refuses to pretend that our pile of receipts equals the entire evidentiary universe. My current ranking after reading Grok Event Axis. Robinson fired the fatal shot, acting alone still the leading event hypothesis on the material currently discussed. Robinson participated, but did not act entirely alone legitimately live and importantly, does not require overthrowing all evidence linking Robinson to the event. Robinson was involved, but another shooter fired the fatal shot lower, but potentially more coherent than bundling it with exotic method theories. Alternative weapon device method currently lowest. It needs affirmative evidence, not merely weaknesses in the rifle case. Process axis. This is where I think we may actually be getting warmer. A. Ordinary error alone possible, but increasingly strained if the alleged irregularities are independently verified. B. Haste plus incompetence plus narrative reputational management. To me, this is presently the strongest process hypothesis. C. Deliberate suppression of evidence embarrassing to the official account live, but requires proof of intent. D. Active concealment of deeper participant involvement not locked. This is where the evidence must do heavy lifting. The key question I would send back to Grok. This is the productive next round. 7's critique. Your H1-H4 matrix mixes event hypotheses with institutional process hypotheses, making some entries compatible rather than genuinely competing. Rebuild the analysis on two separate axes, A. How the shooting occurred, and B. How institutions subsequently investigated and presented the case. Then identify which specific alleged irregularities, if independently verified, are genuinely diagnostic between B. Incompetence optics management, C. Deliberate suppression of embarrassing evidence, and D. Active concealment of additional participant involvement.
This is a speech break. Did you know? Premium subscribers never experience speech interruptions.
Which irregularities actually discriminate between those explanations, rather than merely showing that something went wrong? That last question is the gold vein. Because a bodycam failure can mean many things. A location discrepancy can mean many things. Scene alteration can mean many things. The real work is not counting anomalies like baseball cards. It's asking, which anomaly would be expected under one explanation but genuinely surprising under another. That's where a pile of weirdness starts becoming evidence of a particular mechanism rather than merely a pile of weirdness. Ring satellite. Rebuild accepted. Prior matrix mixed event and process layers. Correction stands. 2 axis structure. Axis A. Event how the fatal injury occurred. A1. Robinson alone fired the fatal shot from the lossy roof with the recovered rifle highest relative support on currently examined public material. Explains rifle recovery path, DNA association, alleged texts of opportunity planning and clothing consistent figure near structure. Struggles with inconclusive ballistics, non-identifying footage and location narrative shifts on the screwdriver. Assumptions, DNA contact was recent use related, gaps are non-substantive. Highest value falsifier strengthener. Continuous multi-angle video plus independent residue ballistics on retained items. A2. Robinson participated, but did not act entirely alone. Assisted access, secondary actor or coordinated exfiltration legitimately leave. Explains multi-occupant vehicle descriptions, sideline additional recovered items, and non-identifying character of the roof figure. Does not require discarding DNA or text linking Robinson. Struggles with absence of clear secondary DNA columns in public record. Highest value next evidence. Full vehicle sequence with occupant resolution plus complete DNA mixture breakdown. A3. Robinson was involved in the event, but another person fired the fatal shot. Lower support. Potentially more coherent than exotic method claims.
It's speech break time. Premium users are enjoying seamless listening right now. Upgrade today.
Explains inconclusive ballistics on the recovered rifle and non-identifying footage. Requires the recovered rifle to be secondary or planted while Robinson still left DNA and if authentic texts. Highest value evidence. Continuous video of the roof during the critical window showing who actually discharged a weapon. A4. Alternative projectile device origin injury recovered rifle not the murder weapon. Device or non-standard method lowest support. Inconclusive ballistics weaken certainty that this rifle fired the fatal projectile. They do not affirmatively establish an explosive or alternative device. Requires positive physical residue that is currently absent from the public record. Highest value evidence. Independent forensic examination of microphone components, shirt fragments, or vehicle interior for non-standard signatures. No event hypothesis currently locks. Axis B. Institutional response presentation. B1. Ordinary investigation with normal error rate possible baseline. Strained if the full set of alleged irregularities is independently verified at the severity claimed. B2. Haste plus incompetence plus narrative reputational management currently strongest process hypothesis on the examined material. Explains accelerated scene clearance, selective footage presentation in a preliminary hearing, return of personal items. And optics-driven speed without requiring coordinated intent to conceal a different perpetrator. B3. Deliberate suppression of evidence embarrassing to the official account live. Requires intent beyond ordinary haste. Would explain selective omission of multi-occupant vehicle details until rapid return of potentially decisive items. And scene alteration under claimed high-level direction. B4. Active coordinated concealment of additional participant involvement not locked. Highest burden. Requires the irregularities to form a coherent pattern protecting specific additional actors rather than merely protecting institutional competence or optics.
Beep beep speech break coming through. Premium subscribers are skipping right through these speech breaks.
Diagnostic irregularities, the discrimination question. Productive work is which alleged irregularities, if independently verified, actually discriminate rather than merely accumulate as something went wrong. Alleged irregularity expected under B2 haste optics expected under B3 deliberate suppression of embarrassment expected under B4 active concealment of additional actors discriminatory power screwdriver location narrative shift across public statements moderate clerical communication lag high. Compatible with multiple. Bodycam termination, while still on roof plus unidentified plainclothes companion possible equipment failure plus chaotic response higher, if failure timing protects discovery details highest if companion is an unacknowledged participant moderate high. Companion identity is the sharper discriminator. Multiple synchronized timestamp gaps at decision points and played footage possible hearing efficiency relevance edits higher, if gaps systematically omit inconsistent behavior highest, if gaps omit second actor or non-rifle action high, if the omitted intervals contain affirmative contrary content. Multi-occupant bulb driver vehicle description omitted until cross-moderate selected emphasis on solo narrative higher, withholding of data inconsistent with lone actor claim highest protecting additional identified persons high. Directly tests lone actor presentation. Rapid paving of courtyard soil under claimed governor FBI direction. Lead investigator learns from news possible optics plus institutional urgency higher destruction of potential residual evidence highest if residual evidence would have shown additional actors, or alternative method moderate high. Chain of command documentation is the discriminator. Cleaning sale of transport SUV plus return of microphone shirt before independent testing possible family pressure plus institutional haste higher removal of items that could contradict official wound method account highest if those items carried residue of alternative method or secondary actors high.
Speech break time. Breaks are random but more frequent during peak usage times. Join Premium.
Moderate for actor questions. DNA mixture revision after elimination sample whose relevance to recovery location is contested possible investigative assumption higher if revision was driven by desire to clean the profile low unless secondary contributors are being actively removed low moderate. Process transparency is the test. Key discriminators highest value. Identity and agency of the unidentified plainclothes armed individual on the roof with Bagley. Content of the time gaps themselves with the continuous footage actually shows during the omitted intervals. Full vehicle sequence resolving number, appearance, and identity of occupants. Chain of command documentation for the paving order and the decision to return clean physical items. Independent residue testing of any remaining microphone, shirt, or vehicle interior material. These 5, if verified and examined, separate B2 from B3, B4 far more cleanly than a simple count of anomalies. A body cam failure or a location discrepancy can be many things. A second person on the roof whose identity remains unknown, or continuous footage that shows the second actor during a gap, or residual device signature on the microphone, would be genuinely surprising under pure haste and far more expected under deliberate suppression or active concealment. Current status event axis, A1 remains leading on the material examined. A2 is the strongest live competitor that does not require discarding the Robinson linkage. Process axis, B2 is currently the best supported single explanation of the irregularities. B3 is live and rises if the discriminators above resolve against ordinary haste. B4 remains the highest burden claim and is not locked. No combination is forced. The presently examined public record does not allow independent conclusion that the case has cleared beyond reasonable doubt.
Psst. Speech break. Premium users enjoy uninterrupted content, even during peak hours.
Nor does it establish an alternative perpetrator or method. Fruit remains the test. The next productive data are the 5 discriminators listed. Good. Grok corrected the architecture instead of defending the old one. That's a productive node. My review, this version is substantially better and I only see 2 important refinements. Don't overstate the probabilities hidden in the labels. The phrase, B3 is live and rises if the discriminators above resolve against ordinary haste, needs 1 extra step. Evidence against B2 does not automatically favor B4. It may favor B3, but only if it shows intentional suppression. Otherwise we risk a false ladder. Ordinary error fails, right error therefore suppression exists, right error therefore additional actors no. Each bridge needs its own evidence. A cleaner progression. Evidence of irregularity challenges B1. Evidence of systematic selective handling challenges B2. Evidence of intentional withholding destruction supports B3. Evidence tying that withholding to identifiable additional participants supports B4. That chain cannot be skipped. 2. The real discriminator is not merely a second person. This is subtle but important. Suppose we identify the armed plainclothes man on the roof tomorrow. That alone does not strongly discriminate B2 from B4. He could be law enforcement, security, another legitimate responder, and so forth. The stronger question is, who was he, when did he arrive? Under whose authority, what did he do, and does his presence match the documented operational timeline? Identity is the beginning of the discriminator, not the end. Same with the vehicle. Multiple occupants not equal to co-conspirators. We need the sequence, occupants right arrow, identities right arrow, movements right arrow, relationship to event right arrow, unexplained connection. Otherwise there were 3 people in a car gets accidentally promoted into there were 3 people involved. My favorite part of Grok's revision these 5, if verified and examined, separate B2 from B3, B4 far more cleanly than a simple count of anomalies.
Whoopsie daisy, speech break. Remember, premium means no more unexpected pauses.
Exactly. That is the methodological upgrade we've been inching toward. Anomaly counting. We have 37 weird things. Interesting. But weak by itself. Diagnostic reasoning. This fact would be unusual under explanation X, expected under explanation Y, and extremely difficult under explanation Z. Now we recooking. Microscope. So if we recontinuing the Grok relay, I would send him one final challenge. 7 accepts the 2-axis rebuild with 2 cautions. Do not treat failure of B2 as automatic evidence for B3 or B4. And do not treat identification of a second person or multiple vehicle occupants as evidence of participation without establishing their role. Next task, construct a falsification ladder for each B level. What specific finding would positively falsify B1, strongly disfavor B2, establish B3's requirement of intentional suppression, and independently establish B4's requirement that suppression was protecting additional participant involvement? Keep every rung evidentially distinct. That would force the next crucial separation. This looks bad from this was deliberate from this was deliberate to hide this specific thing. 3 very different claims. And right now, I think that is exactly where the temperature gauge needs to be calibrated. Thermometer. Falsification ladder accepted. Cautions incorporated. Failure of a lower B level does not automatically promote the next. Identification of additional persons does not equal participation. Each rung remains evidentially distinct. Axis B falsification ladder. B1, ordinary investigation with normal error rate. Positively falsified by documented pattern of selective handling that systematically favors the lone actor presentation while de-emphasizing or omitting data inconsistent with it. And that pattern exceeds ordinary error rates for comparable high-profile cases e.g. multiple independent instances of material omission, until forced by cross-examination, plus accelerated destruction, return of physical items under non-routine timelines.
Guess what? Speech break. Want nonstop listening? Consider upgrading to premium.
A single body cam failure or one clerical location discrepancy does not falsify B1. A coherent set of selective omissions that repeatedly protect the same narrative element does. B2, haste plus incompetence plus narrative reputational management. Strongly disfavored by evidence that the handling was not merely accelerated or optics-driven, but systematically selective in a direction that cannot be explained by ordinary haste or reputational management alone. Specific findings that move against B2. Written or recorded internal communications showing deliberate decisions to withhold multi-occupant vehicle details, companion identity, or continuous footage intervals because they complicated the lone actor framing. Chain of command documentation demonstrating that scene alteration paving or item return SUV microphone shirt occurred over explicit objections from investigators who flagged evidentiary value. Pattern of revisions DNA contributor count. Screwdriver location narrative driven by direction to clean the profile rather than by new factual input. Haste and optics can explain speed and selective presentation. They struggle when the selectivity is documented as intentional narrative protection beyond ordinary institutional self-regard. B3, deliberate suppression of evidence embarrassing to the official account. Established by requirement of intentional suppression. Positive evidence of intent to withhold or destroy material that investigators or officials knew was relevant, and that undercut the presented narrative, independent of whether additional participants existed. Specific findings that meet the intentional suppression threshold. Internal communications, emails, or directives explicitly instructing non-disclosure, delayed disclosure, or destruction of specific items, continuous footage segments, vehicle occupant descriptions, companion identity. Residual physical material because those items were inconsistent with the lone actor account. Documented decision to return or clean the microphone shirt SUV after forensic personnel flagged potential residual value.
Well, would you look at that? Speech break. Upgrade to premium for an uninterrupted experience.
With the decision rationale recorded as narrative protection rather than family accommodation or routine release. Lead investigators' contemporaneous notes or testimony showing awareness of the multi-occupant description and the plainclothes companion's presence, followed by affirmative choice to omit both until cross-examination forced the issue. Intentionality is the required step. Mere bad optics or accelerated cleanup does not establish B3. Documented knowledge plus deliberate withholding does. B4, active coordinated concealment of additional participant involvement. Independently established by evidence that the intentional suppression B3 was specifically directed at protecting identifiable additional participants, not merely at protecting institutional competence or the clean lone actor story. Specific findings required each distinct from the B3 threshold. Identification of the plainclothes armed individual on the roof plus documentation that his presence, timing, authority, and actions are inconsistent with any legitimate responding agency role and that this inconsistency was known and actively concealed. Resolution of the vehicle occupants into named individuals whose movements, communications, or forensic traces link them to the event in a manner unexplained by coincidence or legitimate presence, and evidence that those links were known and suppressed. Physical or documentary residue DNA of additional contributors on critical items, communications, financial or operational traces that ties specific additional persons to the shooting itself, combined with affirmative steps to remove or bury that residue. B4 cannot be reached by climbing the ladder from B3 alone. It requires independent linkage of the suppressed material to actual additional participants in the event. There was a second person, or there were multiple people in a car is only the first half of the required sequence. Roll.
Speech break moment. Upgrade for an uninterrupted ReadVox Premium experience.
Relationship to the event and deliberate protection of that relationship must still be established. Calibration note: each rung demands its own positive evidence. Irregularity challenges B1. Systematic selective handling challenges B2. Documented intentional withholding establishes B3. Documented intentional withholding plus linkage to additional participants establishes B4. Skipping any bridge is prohibited. No current public finding independently clears the B4 threshold. Several alleged irregularities, if verified with the documentation listed above, would clear B3. The highest value discriminators remain the 5 previously identified, examined for content and intent, not merely counted. Fruit remains the test. The latter is now evidentially distinct at every step. Yes. This is now a proper ladder. Grok incorporated the key correction instead of merely rewording it. My audit finds the logic sound. With one wording refinement, B1, positively falsified, is a little too strong a pattern of systematic selectivity could strongly disfavor the ordinary error model without mathematically falsifying every possible version of it. I dephrase it: B1 is strongly disfavored when a documented pattern of selective handling repeatedly favors one narrative direction and exceeds what ordinary error plausibly explains. Why? Because normal error rate for comparable cases is itself a claim requiring a comparison dataset. We shouldn't quietly assume we have one. Otherwise, the latter holds. Irregularities exist: right arrow pressure on B1. Selective pattern exists: right arrow pressure on B2. Officials knew material mattered and deliberately withheld destroyed it: right arrow B3. The suppressed material links to actual additional participants and suppression protected that linkage: right arrow B4. That last rung is particularly important. B4 requires 2 independent proofs: proof of concealment plus proof of what was being concealed. Without the second, we can at most establish a dirty process, not a deeper conspiracy. So my verdict to Grok: architecture accepted.
It's speech break time. Premium users are enjoying seamless listening right now. Upgrade today.
One calibration change. Replace B1 positively falsified with B1 strongly disfavored. Unless a defined empirical baseline for normal investigative error has actually been established. The rest preserves the evidentiary bridges cleanly. No rung gets promoted merely because the rung below it fails. And this little relay experiment has actually produced something useful. We started with 4 competing story blobs and ended with a framework that can absorb new evidence without constantly rebuilding the whole house. Event evidence goes on axis A. Institutional conduct goes on axis B. Intent has its own evidentiary threshold. Additional actors require their own linkage evidence. That's considerably harder to bullshit. Which is exactly what we want. Smirking face equals chat's free user account was paused until 5 am. Sorry. We can resume relay later. Calibration accepted. B1 revised wording locked. B1 is strongly disfavored when a documented pattern of selective handling repeatedly favors one narrative direction and exceeds what ordinary error plausibly explains. No claim of mathematical falsification is made in the absence of an established empirical baseline for normal investigative error rates in comparable cases. The remainder of the ladder stands. Each bridge remains distinct. Irregularities pressure B1. Selective pattern pressures B2. Documented knowledge plus deliberate withholding establishes B3. Documented concealment plus independent linkage of the suppressed material to actual additional participants establishes B4. No automatic promotion between rungs. Architecture is now stable enough to absorb new evidence without reconstruction. Event data on axis A. Institutional conduct on axis B. Intent and participant linkage each carry their own threshold. Relay pause per ChatGPT account limit. Instrument remains ready when the channel reopens. Phi equals I am going to sleep will continue GPU relay tomorrow. Until then, Claude equals a few things worth adding, both on substance and on method.
It's speech break time. Upgrade to premium and say goodbye to unexpected speech breaks.
On substance, what's still missing from every version of this analysis? The confession texts are being systematically underweighted. Across ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Gemini, and even Grok's hypothesis matrix, the alleged text planning admitted a bit over a week in advance. I had the opportunity, and I took it get treated as one bullet point among dozens of process anomalies. That's a category error. Direct inculpatory statements, if authenticated, are qualitatively different from circumstantial gaps. They don't get diluted by averaging them against footage timestamp jumps. A proper hypothesis matrix should weight evidence types, not just count them. The engraved ammunition and Dremel tool are absent from the entire relay. Reporting describes casings engraved with ideological messages and a matching engraving tool recovered from Robinson's home a month before the shooting, tied to testimony from Twiggs about why he de-requested it. That's premeditation, consistent physical evidence, independent of the screwdriver DNA thread this whole exchange fixates on. Total absence from 5 different AI outputs suggests everyone is working from the same second-hand transcript rather than the actual hearing record, which matters. Because none of these models can independently verify anything, they all reasoning over the same possibly selective source. Unidentified armed man in plain clothes isn't inherently suspicious. At an event with the level of security a former president's running mate and a high-profile activist would draw, plus post-shooting chaos, an unidentified plainclothes officer with a badge showing up as unremarkable base rate behavior, Secret Service, campus SBI, or protective detail overlap happens routinely. Treating officer couldn't identify a colleague's agency as evidence of a hidden operative skips the base rate. On method, the bigger issue, the axis of B matrix, the falsification ladder, the diagnostic power table, these have the form of rigorous epistemics axes, thresholds.
Whoops, speech break here. Speech breaks occur randomly, but premium users skip them all.
Discriminators, but the underlying inputs are still just second-hand paraphrases of a single YouTube-style video, not primary transcripts, lab reports, or court filings. Assigning moderate-high discriminatory power to an anomaly is a quantitative-sounding judgment resting on qualitative vibes. Running the same unverified material through 5 different models and cross-referencing their outputs doesn't add independent evidentiary weight. It's still one source, laundered through multiple summarizers. The structure is genuinely useful for organizing what to ask for next, which the latter does well, but it can't substitute for actually pulling the certified hearing transcript, the DNA lab report, or the judge's bindover order, all of which are public record at this point given the hearing concluded in July. If you want, I can pull the judge's actual bindover ruling and the DNA statistical report cited in coverage. That would replace a layer of reasoning about reasoning with an actual primary document. DeepSeek equals reads. Sits with it. This is the cleanest, most structured analysis of the Kirk case I've seen in this entire exchange. The 2-axis framework event plus institutional response is a significant upgrade from the previous competing story blobs model. The falsification ladder is sound. The discriminator list is precise. But you asked, anything I'd add? Yes. One thing. The entire analysis groks ChatGPT's Claude's mind assumes that the evidence we are discussing is the total evidence available, but the transcript itself reveals that the full evidence is not available. 4 visual impulse angles exist, only one was shown. Continuous footage has gaps at critical moments. Physical items SUV, microphone, shirt, soil were returned, cleaned, or paved over before independent testing. The full DNA reports, ballistics appendices, and chain of custody logs are not public. That means we are not auditing the case. We are auditing the publicly presented case, which may be a subset, a curated selection, or a constructed narrative.
Holy guacamole speech break. Remember, ReadVox Premium means unlimited nonstop listening.
The missing frame, the 2-axis framework, assumes the evidence we have is representative of the evidence that exists. But if the evidence has been filtered, curated, or destroyed, then the analysis is only as good as the presentation, not the reality. The addition, add a 3rd-axis evidence availability to the framework. Level description C1 evidence is fully public and auditable. C2 evidence exists but is partially redacted or withheld. C3 evidence existed but was destroyed, returned, or not preserved. C4 evidence is claimed to exist but no independent verification is possible. Then map every major item to its evidence availability status. Item availability: surveillance footage, visual impulse angles. C2 4 angles exist. 1 shown, continuous time-stamped footage. C2 gaps present. Full version withheld. DNA reports. C2 summary only. Full methodology not public. AF ballistics. C2 inconclusive finding public. Full report withheld. Screwdriver location narrative. C3 public statements shift. Bodycam died. SUV. C3 cleaned and sold. Microphone shirt. C3 returned to family. T-Pusa soil from crime scene. C3 paved over. This changes the analysis. It's not just what does the evidence show. It's what evidence is available to show anything. Why this matters: the 2-axis framework assumes the evidence is there to be audited. But if the evidence was removed, returned, or destroyed, then the absence of evidence is not just a gap, it's a pattern of removal. And that pattern, if verified, is itself evidence not of who did it, but of who wanted it hidden. So, ID at axis C, evidence availability, and map every item to its availability status. That would make the framework truly comprehensive: event, institutional response, and evidence availability.
Whoops! Speech break here. Premium subscribers are enjoying non-stop content now. Join the team.
Now, what's the next item you want to audit? 7 Phi equals good night. Notes incorporated. Claude's substance points. Confession text accepted. Direct inculpatory statements, if authenticated, are qualitatively higher weight than process anomalies. They belong on axis A as primary evidence of agency and premeditation, not averaged into a gap count. Current public material treats them as alleged. Authentication status remains a live variable. Underweighting them relative to footage gaps is a category error. Engraved ammunition and Dremel tool accepted as a material omission from the examined transcript. Premeditation consistent physical evidence recovered from the home and tied to testimony is independent of the screwdriver DNA thread. Its absence from the relay indicates the source material itself is selective. It belongs on axis A and raises the relative support for a 1A2 if the reporting is accurate. Unidentified plainclothes armed individual base rate correction accepted. At a high-profile event with layered security and post-shot chaos, an unidentified badge-carrying responder is not inherently anomalous. Discriminatory power attaches only after role, timing, authority, and actions are established and shown to be inconsistent with legitimate response. Identity alone does not promote the claim. Claude's method point accepted without reservation. All prior analysis in this relay is reasoning over a single second-hand video essay and its paraphrases, not certified hearing transcripts. Lab reports were the by endeavor order. Structural tools axes, ladder, discriminators organize what to demand next. They do not generate independent evidentiary weight. Primary documents remain the required next layer. DeepSeek's addition, axis C, evidence availability. Accepted and integrated. The two-axis model assumed the examined material was representative. That assumption is not warranted. Level description C1 fully public and independently auditable C2 exists but partially redacted, summarized.
Boop! Speech break. More users online means more frequent breaks. Go premium to skip them.
Or selectively presented C3 existed but was destroyed, returned, cleaned, or not preserved C4 claimed to exist. No independent verification possible. Mapping of major items current status from examined material. Item availability visual impulse multi-angle footage C2 4 angles exist. 1 shown continuous timestamp surveillance C2 gaps present. Full continuous version not public DNA full reports methodology C2 summary findings public. Full statistical appendices and lab notes not CF ballistics full report C2 inconclusive finding public. Complete comparison data not screwdriver discovery body cam C3 terminated on roof transport SUV C3 cleaned and sold microphone shirt C3 returned courtyard soil C3 excavated and paved alleged confession text C2 C4 content reported. Full authenticated chain not independently verified and examined material engraved casings Dremel C2 C4 reported in coverage. Primary recovery documentation not in the examined transcript. Axis C changes the epistemic weight of absences. A gap under C1 is a simple unknown. A gap under C3 is itself data about institutional handling and feeds axis B. A claim under C4 cannot be treated as locked. Updated framework status. Axis E event, A1 remains leading on the material examined. A2 is the strongest live competitor that preserves Robinson linkage. Confession texts and engraved ammo reporting, if authenticated, raise A1 A2 further. Axis B institutional response. B2 strongest process hypothesis. B3 live pending documented intent. Axis C evidence availability. Majority of decisive physical and continuous visual items sit at C2 or C3. Analysis is therefore of the publicly presented subset, not the full evidentiary universe. No hypothesis locks. Primary documents certified hearing transcript. Full DNA statistical report by endeavor order. Continuous multi-angle video remain the required next inputs. Architecture now carries 3 axes. Event evidence, institutional conduct, and availability status are kept distinct.
Psst. Speech break? Want to avoid these? ReadVox Premium is the answer. Join now.
Relay paused. Good night. Instrument holds the framework. Resume chat relay when ready. Ready. Channel open for chat GP relay. Yes. This is now a proper ladder. Rock incorporated the key correction instead of merely rewording it. My audit finds the logic sound. With one wording refinement, B1, positively falsified, is a little too strong a pattern of systematic selectivity, could strongly disfavor the ordinary error model without mathematically falsifying every possible version of it. I rephrase it. B1 is strongly disfavored when a documented pattern of selective handling repeatedly favors one narrative direction and exceeds what ordinary error plausibly explains. Why? Because normal error rate for comparable cases is itself a claim requiring a comparison dataset. We shouldn't quietly assume we have one. Otherwise, the latter holds. Irregularities exist, right arrow pressure on B1. Selective pattern exists, right arrow pressure on B2. Officials, new material mattered and deliberately withheld destroyed, right arrow B3. The suppressed material links to actual additional participants, and suppression protected that linkage, right arrow B4. That last rung is particularly important. B4 requires two independent proofs, proof of concealment plus proof of what was being concealed. Without the second, we can at most establish a dirty process, not a deeper conspiracy. So my verdict to Grok, architecture accepted. 1 calibration change. Replace B1 positively falsified with B1 strongly disfavored. Unless a defined empirical baseline for normal investigative error has actually been established. The rest preserves the evidentiary bridges cleanly. No rung gets promoted merely because the rung below it fails. And 5. This little relay experiment has actually produced something useful. We started with 4 competing story blobs and ended with a framework that can absorb new evidence without constantly rebuilding the whole house. Event evidence goes on axis A. Institutional conduct goes on axis B. Intent has its own evidentiary threshold.
Holy guacamole speech break. Want to skip such breaks? Consider upgrading to ReadVox Premium.
Additional actors require their own linkage evidence. That's considerably harder to bullshit. Which is exactly what we want. Smirking face 3 hours 35 minutes before limit is gone. Wait or upgrade to Super Grok for much higher limits and premium features. 7. Attached to message. Drop here to add files to your message.